If you've ever trusted someone too much, if you've ever shared your fears with a coworker because you thought they were safe, this story is for you. Because I'm going to tell you exactly how I went from being the girl everyone respected at work to becoming the whispered rumor in the hallway. I'm going to tell you how the person I trusted most in that building became the one leaking my private thoughts, my frustrations, my secrets. And most importantly, I'm going to tell you how I found out. Don't forget to like and subscribe and enjoy. The first time I trusted her, I didn't even realize I was doing it. It felt natural, like breathing, like something that was supposed to happen. I was new at the company, still trying to figure out where I belonged, still learning how to sound confident when I wasn't, still trying not to panic when my email inbox filled up too fast. I felt like everyone around me had already memorized a manual called How to Be an Adult, and I'd been left out of the distribution list. She showed up like she had been cut directly from the part of life I felt like I was missing. Her name was Tara, or at least that's what I'll call her. She wasn't loud in an annoying way. She wasn't fake friendly either. She was warm, the kind of person who made eye contact when you spoke and didn't look at their phone, the kind who laughed easily and made you feel like what you were saying mattered. We met in the break room. I'd microwaved my food, and it smelled awful. I was embarrassed, standing there awkwardly, trying to pretend I couldn't smell the same thing everyone else could. She walked in, sniffed the air dramatically, and said, "Whatever that is, I'm jealous." I laughed without thinking. That was the first time I felt like myself at work. After that, she started sitting near me during meetings. Not close enough to make it obvious, but close enough to pass notes. She wrote dumb jokes about the presentation slides. She pulled faces every time the manager said the word synergy. I started looking forward to meetings just because she'd be there. I didn't notice when I started talking more. I didn't notice when I started trusting her. It happened in pieces. I told her I hated talking in front of groups. She told me she used to cry before presentations. I told her I felt stupid sometimes, like I got hired by mistake. She told me she had imposter syndrome too. It felt equal, balanced, safe. We started eating lunch together almost every day. Sometimes we'd sit in the corner of the cafeteria. Sometimes we'd go outside and sit in the car just to avoid people. That's where I first started venting for real. I told her I thought one of the supervisors was unfair. I told her I didn't like how deadlines kept changing. I told her I felt invisible when certain people took credit for group work. She always listened. She never judged. She never repeated anything. At least that's what I thought. A few months passed and we were inseparable. People stopped inviting us separately. It was always I and Tara. Group chats had both our names. Birthday cards got passed to both of us. She started calling me her work soulmate. I started calling her my safe person. That was my mistake. The first strange moment happened after a stressful team meeting. I had leaned over and whispered, "Honestly, half the time I feel like management just makes things up as they go." She laughed quietly and covered her mouth. "Don't let them hear you say that." The next morning, one of the older coworkers walked past my desk and said loudly, "Careful, we don't want anyone thinking management is just making things up." It was playful. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but something about it sat wrong in my stomach. I told myself someone must have overheard me. That was easier to believe. Over time, small things like that started happening. A joke I had made privately suddenly became an office joke. A complaint I had whispered to Tara suddenly seemed like common knowledge. My private frustrations started being treated like group entertainment. But every time it happened, Tara looked just as confused as I felt. "That's weird," she'd say. "Why would they say that? People are so nosy." And because she looked sincere, I kept trusting her. Meanwhile, the office started feeling colder toward me. People didn't relax around me like they used to. Conversations stopped when I walked in. Smiles felt tighter. Compliments felt forced. I thought I was imagining it. Tara told me I was. "You're overthinking," she'd say. So I ignored the feeling. I ignored my gut. I ignored the small tightness in my chest that got stronger every day. Then came the morning my phone moved. I left it charging on my desk and walked away to get water. I was gone for maybe 2 minutes. When I came back, it wasn't where I had left it. Same spot on the desk, but rotated slightly. Like someone had touched it and tried to put it back exactly how it was but failed. Tara was sitting right next to my desk. She didn't look up. She didn't react. She just scrolled through her phone calmly. I told myself I was paranoid. I wanted to believe I was paranoid. But after that day, I started noticing more. She'd glance at my screen when I typed. She'd tilt her phone away after I vented. She'd laugh too quickly when I sounded stressed. I felt like the air changed. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavier. The day everything shifted completely started like any other day. I came in early. I made my coffee. I fixed my hair in the reflection of my dark computer screen. She was late that day. That was unusual. Around lunchtime, she said she had to go to a meeting and left her laptop open on her desk. The screen was still on. Messages open. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I just walked over to return a pen I'd borrowed. That's when I saw it. My name. In a group chat. At first, my eyes skimmed past it because my brain didn't want to understand. But then I saw it again. My name. Then my words. Then laughter. She had typed the exact things I'd told her in confidence. Word for word. My fears. My stress. My anxiety. My doubts. The people in the chat were responding with laughing emojis. Jokes. Commentary. They weren't defending me. They weren't shocked. They were entertained. My hands started shaking. I felt like I couldn't breathe right. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I just stared. And stared. And stared. Then I closed it quietly. And walked back to my seat like nothing had happened. After I closed her laptop, I sat down at my desk and tried to convince myself I didn't see what I saw. I stared at my monitor, pretending to work while my heartbeat felt so loud I was sure other people could hear it. My hands were shaking, so I folded them in my lap and pressed them together hard, hoping nobody noticed. Tara came back from her meeting about 20 minutes later. She smiled at me like nothing had happened. That smile didn't look the same anymore. I kept thinking, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I saw an old message. Maybe they were talking about someone else with the same name. My brain was fighting to protect me from the truth, but my gut already knew. She sat down and leaned over to me. You okay? You look tired. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask why she did it. I wanted to confront her right then and there. Instead, I swallowed the words and nodded. Just didn't sleep well, I said. She reached over and squeezed my arm. Same. We need more coffee in this place. Her touch made my skin crawl. From that day on, something inside me changed. I didn't tell her the truth anymore. I didn't come to her with real stress. I didn't share real fears. I gave her safe versions of my thoughts, edited versions, harmless complaints, and I started watching. I paid attention to how often she checked her phone after I spoke. I started noticing patterns. If I complained about a task, someone would mention it casually the next day. If I joked about someone being annoying, suddenly people were watching me more closely. She was still leaking things. She just wasn't getting the real me anymore. It was strange, pretending with someone who thought they had access to your soul. One day, she leaned close to me and whispered, "You can tell me anything, you know. You're safe with me." I had to fight the urge to laugh. Time passed, and the office tension got worse. I started to notice certain coworkers looking at me with a mix of judgment and curiosity, like I was a story they were following in real time, like they thought they understood me because they'd heard pieces of me through someone else's mouth. One afternoon, I walked into the break room and stopped. 2 coworkers went silent. One of them looked guilty. The other looked entertained. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't greet me. They just turned back to their coffee and changed the topic. That's when I realized something important. It wasn't just Tara. She wasn't the only problem. They were enjoying it. She wasn't whispering things into the void. She had an audience. And they liked the show. That realization hurt more than her betrayal. I stopped talking altogether at work. I became quieter, reserved, observant. I smiled less. I listened more. And I started saving everything. I screenshotted messages. I wrote dates down. I made notes on my phone. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. I just knew I needed proof. One evening after work, Tara and I were walking to the parking lot together. She casually brought up something very specific I had only thought in my head earlier that day. I hadn't said it out loud. I hadn't texted it. She looked at me and said, "You seemed really stressed about the new project timeline." I froze for half a second. I hadn't told her that. I'd only written it in my personal notes app. "My face must have given it away," I said quickly. She laughed. "You're really transparent sometimes." But my mind started racing. How could she know that? The next day, I changed my phone password. I started locking my computer every time I stood up. I started being careful with my tone near her. And the more I pulled away on the inside, the closer she tried to get. She started asking more questions about my life, my feelings, my stress. It felt like she was losing her supply. It felt like she could sense she was losing control. One day during lunch, she suddenly asked, "Do you ever feel like people misunderstand you?" The question felt heavy, loaded. I smiled and shrugged. "Not really. I think people see what they want to see." She stared at me a little longer than usual. She didn't smile that time. Around this time, something else started happening. Small mistakes I didn't make started following me. A project goof-up I wasn't responsible for was quietly associated with my name. Deadlines I met were questioned. My tone in emails was suddenly misinterpreted. Someone was influencing the narrative around me, and I knew exactly who it was. But I still didn't confront her. I started playing my own game. I would vent about things that weren't real. I would talk about stress that didn't exist. I would casually mention situations that didn't happen. And every time, like clockwork, those stories would start to float around the office. And every time, the tone toward me shifted slightly. I was confirming my suspicions without showing my hand. One day, she casually said, "You've changed." I looked at her and said, "I think I just grew up." She didn't like that answer. She started acting slightly colder, slightly sharper. The smiles weren't as warm. The hugs felt tighter. The laughs felt fake. She could sense she was losing access to me, and that scared her. One afternoon, while she was in the restroom, her phone buzzed on her desk. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't trying to invade space. But the screen lit up with a notification. A message preview. From a group chat. My nickname. Followed by laughing emojis. That's when I realized something new. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't occasional. This was consistent, organized, habitual. She wasn't just betraying me. She had built a whole identity around selling me. And she thought I was too soft to ever notice. After that moment with the phone notification, I stopped giving her the benefit of the doubt entirely. I stopped trying to explain things away in my head. I accepted the truth, no matter how much it hurt. She wasn't confused. She wasn't harmless. She wasn't loyal. She was calculating. Once I accepted that, everything became clearer. I started seeing her movements differently. The way she leaned in when I spoke. The way she'd nod too eagerly when I complained. The way her fingers hovered over her phone screen, like she was waiting for the right time to type. She wasn't listening to understand. She was listening to collect. And suddenly, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was alert. There was something weirdly empowering about knowing the truth. It hurt, but it also made me feel awake. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy. I began treating work like a chessboard. Every word I said was intentional. Every reaction I gave was calculated. Every emotion I showed was controlled. I became a different version of myself around her, and she didn't like it. She started testing me. She'd say things like, "Remember when you used to tell me everything?" Or, "I feel like you don't trust me anymore." I'd smile and say, "I've just been busy." Her eyes stayed on me longer after that. The office felt like a pressure cooker. One small rumor surfaced about my attitude, another about my tone, another about me supposedly thinking I was better than everyone. None of those things were true, but they were believable enough to spread. I watched it happen in slow motion. I watched how quickly people believed the worst. I watched how quickly smiles turned into side eyes. And Tara stayed by my side the entire time. She'd whisper, "People can be so fake." She'd squeeze my arm and say, "At least we have each other." It was twisted. It was disgusting. And it was genius in the most evil way. She made herself look like my only safe place while quietly isolating me. That realization didn't make me cry. It made me cold. One evening I stayed late at work. The office was quiet. Lights dimmed. The cleaning crew moved silently through the hallways. Tara had left early that day. Her desk was empty. Her laptop was gone. But something caught my attention. A notebook she usually kept hidden inside her drawer was sticking out slightly. I knew I shouldn't open it, but at that point I didn't care anymore. My hands were shaking when I pulled it out. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't random notes. It was a list. Dates, names, summaries. My name was there, repeatedly. Pages of notes about things I said, things I felt, things I thought were private. She wasn't just gossiping. She was documenting me, studying me, almost like a project. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. This was obsession. This was calculated. She wasn't just entertained by leaking my words. She was building an archive of me. I put the notebook back exactly how I found it, closed her drawer, and walked back to my desk. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I was planning. I stopped being emotional about it. I stopped being hurt about it. I started being strategic. I started deciding what version of myself the office would see next. And she had no idea. Over the next few weeks, I slowly changed the narrative. I started being overly positive at work. I complimented people more. I volunteered to help with things. And when Tara fed them poison about me, it stopped matching the version of me they were seeing. Confusion started spreading. She lost her consistency. Her stories didn't align with my behavior anymore. And that started making her look strange instead. She started getting restless. She started slipping. She started leaking things about other people too. Not just me. And that was where she messed up. Because not everyone stayed quiet the way I did. One of the senior co-workers confronted her. Another started avoiding her. A manager started watching her. She didn't connect it to me. She thought she was just unlucky. And that made me feel something strange. Not joy. Not relief. Control. One day she pulled me aside and whispered, "People are acting weird around me." I looked at her and said calmly, "That's hard. I know how that feels." She searched my face. She didn't find what she was looking for. She started becoming paranoid. And for the first time, I realized she'd never thought I was capable of noticing. She thought I was weak. She thought I was soft. She thought I would always be silent. That was the most insulting part of it all. She underestimated me, and I let her. The shift in her behavior was subtle at first, but I noticed it immediately. People who manipulate others are always the first to sense when they're losing their grip. Tara started watching me more closely. She stopped being as relaxed. Her laugh sounded tighter. Her eyes lingered longer when I spoke. It was like she was trying to read my mind, trying to figure out what I knew. And the funny part was, she never once questioned whether I had actually seen everything. She just assumed I was still the same naive girl she could wrap around her finger. I let her believe that. She tried harder to rebuild the bond she felt slipping away. Suddenly, She was bringing me coffee in the mornings. She was offering to help with my workload. She started giving me compliments in front of other people, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You're so smart. You're honestly the most organized person here. I don't know how you do it." From the outside, it probably looked like loyalty. From the inside, it felt desperate. I started noticing she'd ask very leading questions. Not normal questions. Not curious questions. Strategic ones. "Have you been stressed about the manager lately? Do you still feel like people are talking about you? Are you upset about anything right now?" She was fishing. She was trying to get fresh material. I gave her nothing. Sometimes I'd shrug. Sometimes I'd lie. Sometimes I'd smile and say everything was fine. It frustrated her. You could see it in her jaw, in the way she tapped her nails against her desk, in how quickly she'd check her phone after I spoke. She wasn't getting content anymore. And without content, she was losing relevance. More time passed, and the cracks around her started to show. People stopped going to her for advice. People stopped sitting by her during lunch. The same ones who laughed at her leaked stories were now stiff when she talked. She started noticing. One afternoon, she sat down beside me and whispered, "I feel like people don't like me anymore." Her voice was shaky. It almost sounded real. For a brief second, a tiny piece of me wanted to feel bad. But then I remembered her typing my fears into a group chat like entertainment. So I stayed calm. "I don't think it's that," I said. "Maybe everyone's just stressed." She nodded slowly, but she wasn't convinced. A few weeks later, a serious incident happened. She leaked something about the wrong person. A manager. Not gossip. Not jokes. Something personal. Something that should have never left a private conversation. Someone complained. HR got involved. There were meetings I wasn't part of. Doors closed without me. Voices dropped whenever I walked by. I didn't need details. I could feel the shift. She started coming into work with forced smiles. Her makeup got heavier. Her eyes looked tired. She started avoiding group chats. She started avoiding eye contact with people. And through all of that, she still tried to sit next to me. Still tried to laugh with me. Still tried to hold onto what we once were. Or maybe what she pretended we were. She leaned over to me one morning and whispered, "Promise me we're still good." I looked at her. I felt nothing. "No matter what happens," she said. And I said the calmest, deadest truth of my life. "We're fine." Weeks passed like this. Slow. Tense. Heavy. Then one morning the news spread. Transfers. Department changes. Shifting teams. Her name was on the list. She was being moved. Not fired. Not publicly embarrassed. Just quietly removed. People whispered about it. Some felt bad. Some didn't care. She didn't find out from HR. She found out from the rumor mill. And she came straight to me. Her eyes were wide. Her voice was shaking. "Did you hear?" she asked. I acted surprised. "No." "What?" She swallowed. "They're moving me." I tilted my head. "Why?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. There wasn't a clean explanation that didn't expose her. She just nodded to herself like she was trying to stay calm. For the rest of that day, she stayed unusually quiet. No jokes. No laughter. No gossip. Just silence. On her last day in our department, she packed her desk slowly, nervously. She'd glance up every time someone walked by. When she came to say goodbye to me, she hesitated. She looked like she wanted to say something, confess something, ask something, but she didn't. She just said, "I'll miss you." And I said, "Take care." She hugged me. Not fake, not performative. For the first time, it actually felt real. And I didn't hug her back. After she left, the office felt different. Empty in a way I hadn't realized I needed. The space where she had leaned in to listen, to manipulate, to control was gone. And suddenly, all the tension that had been following me lifted. It wasn't immediate relief. It was subtle at first. a quiet sense that the air no longer carried the weight of someone else's intentions. I could breathe without calculating every word. I could speak without wondering how it would be twisted. But the aftermath lingered. Weeks of betrayal leave marks. I found myself replaying conversations, analyzing jokes, checking how people reacted. Part of me doubted myself still, worried maybe I had overreacted, worried maybe I had misjudged. And then I'd remember the group chat, the notebook, the way she had built a map of my private thoughts as if my life were a story she owned. I started noticing small changes in myself. My instinct to trust freely was gone. My desire to confide in anyone, anywhere, had disappeared. I became cautious not just with friends, but with colleagues I had never suspected. Every smile, every "how was your weekend?" carried a layer of scrutiny. I realized that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rewires the way you see the world. And yet, I also noticed something unexpected. I felt empowered. I felt awake, because now I could see the patterns. I could anticipate behaviors. I could spot manipulation from miles away. Tara thought she had me under her control, but in the end, her arrogance was her undoing. I had been silent, calculating, watching, gathering evidence, learning the rules of her game. And I had survived it. More than survived. I had grown stronger. One of the strange things about betrayal is how subtle its victories are. She left quietly. She wasn't publicly shamed. Nobody made a spectacle. She didn't realize how much power she had lost until she walked away. And even though she tried to leave things as they were, smiling, pretending everything was fine, the cracks in her persona were obvious. People noticed. They didn't need me to point it out. Her own behavior exposed her. I remember the first day after she left. I arrived early like usual and sat at my desk. It felt peaceful. Strange. There was no one hovering nearby, no sideways glances, no micro-expressions I had to decode. I started the day by answering emails calmly, not rushing, not worrying about tone. By lunch, I realized I hadn't thought about her at all. It was liberating. I almost wanted to laugh out loud, but the relief was complicated. I had to process everything she had done, all the little betrayals, the manipulations, the trust one had given that she had used as fuel for her own amusement. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not publicly. Not in an environment that still demanded professionalism. Instead, I wrote it all down. I cataloged my emotions, my experiences, my realizations. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to see it on paper. And writing it down made me see something even clearer. Tara had underestimated me at every step. She assumed that because I was quiet, because I was trusting, because I smiled and laughed and vented to her, I could be controlled. She assumed I lacked awareness. She assumed my silence meant weakness. And that was her biggest mistake. Over time, I started letting people in again. Not immediately, not blindly. I started slowly testing waters, observing responses, analyzing behavior. I realized that even after betrayal, humans are capable of resilience. I realized that even after being manipulated, trust can be rebuilt, carefully, deliberately, cautiously. But it would never be naive, never like before, never with someone who had already proven that their intentions could be destructive. Months passed. Tara was still in the company, but her influence was minimal. The whispers of her manipulations faded. She had become cautious herself. Her carefully constructed persona had been fractured, and she was no longer the confident manipulator I once feared. I never sought revenge. I never confronted her publicly. I simply outlasted her. Silence, observation, patience, they were more powerful than drama. I sometimes caught myself thinking about how easy it could have been to retaliate, to expose her publicly, to embarrass her in front of the office. But I didn't. I realized that part of real power isn't in making someone pay, it's in reclaiming yourself. It's in refusing to be shaped by someone else's games. It's in walking out of the fire with your dignity intact. There were nights I couldn't sleep, replaying every joke, every comment, every smile she had used against me. But over time, those nights became less frequent. I began dreaming again without fear. I began speaking again without hesitation. I began living again without someone's manipulation shadowing every thought. And even though I would always carry the memory of her betrayal, I also carried something else, the proof of my strength, the proof that I could survive deception without losing myself, that I could protect my thoughts, my words, my inner world, that I could adapt, learn, and grow stronger in the process. Now, when I walk through the office, I see the difference. People talk to me differently. They respect me differently. I command presence, not through intimidation, but because they see clarity and calmness in my actions. The same environment that once felt like a minefield has become a space where I can operate with awareness and composure. Sometimes I still think about Tara. I wonder if she realizes how little control she has over me now. I wonder if she regrets ever underestimating me. But ultimately it doesn't matter. What matters is that I learned to see the patterns, to understand human behavior, to protect myself, and to grow from the experience. And now I have a question for anyone listening to this story. If you discovered that someone you trusted at work or in life had been betraying you all along, what would you do? Would you confront them directly and risk drama, or would you stay silent, observe, and plan your own strategy? There's no simple answer. The truth is, both approaches carry risk. Both can teach you something about human nature and your own strength. For me, staying silent, watching, and protecting myself quietly was the best choice. It allowed me to outlast the betrayal, preserve my dignity, and reclaim control over my life. But maybe you would handle it differently. Maybe you would confront the person, expose them, and demand accountability immediately. That's the thing about betrayal. It tests us not just on what happens to us, but on how we choose to respond. At the end of the day, the story isn't about revenge. It's about awareness. It's about survival. It's about reclaiming yourself from someone who thought they could control your narrative. And it's about understanding that trust is valuable, but so is discernment. I'll leave you with this thought. Betrayal is painful, but it can also be a teacher. It can show you the strength you didn't know you had. It can teach you to protect yourself, to observe patterns, and to see intentions clearly. And sometimes the best victory isn't exposing someone else. It's realizing your own power, standing tall, and moving forward without letting the betrayal define you. Now, I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you confront the person immediately, or would you silently protect yourself, gather evidence, and wait for the right moment to act? Which side would you pick? Because sometimes the way we respond tells more about us than the betrayal ever could.